sugar entering the bloodstream at an extreme speed. The pancreas is releasing insulin non-stop, trying to control the chaos. The intestine is starting to become inflamed. The brain craves more sugar a few hours after the last meal. And this is just the first day. After 72 hours of eating only Oreos, your body would probably already begin to enter a state of metabolic stress. The energy begins to fluctuate violently. Hunger gets out of control, my stomach is starting to complain. And the brain enters a constant cycle of dopamine and glucose drops. But the scariest thing happens a few days later. Because as long as you continue to fill your body with refined sugar, ultra-processed flour, and industrial fat, your body slowly begins to realize that it is running out of essential nutrients to function. On the fifth day, many people would likely begin to feel mental fatigue, irritability, headaches, intestinal discomfort, and even episodes of diarrhea. Even when consuming thousands of calories a day, the body starts to act as if it were malnourished. Because Oreo can feed your sugar addiction, but it can't support its body. And today we're going to see exactly what would happen inside your body, day after day, if you ate only Oreos for 7 days straight. Day 1. On the first day, your brain would probably love the experiment. Each Oreo triggers an extremely strong combination of refined sugar and ultra-processed fat, rapidly activating the brain's reward centers. Within the first few minutes, you might feel immediate pleasure, increased energy, and that feeling of wanting to eat just one more. But inside the body, things start to get strange very quickly. Sugar enters the bloodstream at an extreme speed, and the pancreas reacts by releasing large amounts of insulin to try to control the excess glucose. A few hours later, the first sharp drop in energy occurs. And that's where the cycle begins. You eat Oreo. Sugar levels rise. The energy surges. Then it plummets. Then the brain asks for more sugar again. By the end of the first day, many people would probably already feel more hunger than usual, constant thirst, and that strange feeling of never being truly satisfied. And the gut, it would already begin to realize that something is wrong. Day 2. On the second day, your body would likely wake up inflamed and tired. Excess sugar and refined flour begin to directly affect digestion. Many people would likely experience a heavy stomach, gas, intestinal discomfort, and even episodes of diarrhea, because the body simply cannot function well when fed only ultra-processed foods all day long. But the brain also begins to suffer. At this point, your energy would likely become unstable. You would experience brief bursts of energy right after eating Oreos, followed by fatigue, irritability, and difficulty concentrating. And there's something even stranger going on. Even after consuming thousands of calories, the body begins to act as if it's desperately searching for food. Because calories don't equal nutrition. Your body starts to notice the lack of protein, vitamins, minerals, and fiber, and sends constant hunger signals trying to compensate for what isn't getting through. And on the third day, the effects start to become much harder to ignore. Day 3. By the third day, your body would likely begin to lose its ability to hide the wear and tear. You might wake up with a puffier face, tired eyes, and that strange feeling of heaviness in your body first thing in the morning. Even having consumed many calories the day before, the feeling wouldn't be one of energy, but rather of exhaustion. And this happens because the sugar in Oreos is already completely disrupting the way your body produces and uses energy. Every time you eat an Oreo, glucose levels rise rapidly in your bloodstream. The pancreas reacts by releasing insulin to try to control the excess sugar. But shortly after, there's a sharp drop in energy. And then the brain starts craving more sugar again. It is at this point that many people would begin to notice a kind of temporary addiction. You would probably feel the urge to eat Oreos even without real hunger, just to try to recapture that quick feeling of pleasure and energy. But while this is happening in the brain, the gut is probably already suffering quite a bit. After 3 days with virtually no fiber, protein, or real nutrients, digestion begins to become completely unregulated. Some people would feel a heavy stomach and constant discomfort. Others might start experiencing frequent episodes of diarrhea, gas, and intestinal irritation. And there's another important detail. Your body starts to realize it's receiving energy, but not the kind it needs to function properly. Then the brain enters a kind of nutritional alert state, increasing feelings of hunger and decreasing your mental alertness. At this point, many people would probably begin to feel slow thinking, irritability, difficulty focusing, and an overwhelming craving for anything fresh or healthy. And while all this is happening, the inflammation inside the body continues to silently increase. Day 4. On the 4th day, the body would likely begin to enter a true state of nutritional exhaustion. That initial feeling of pleasure from eating Oreos would begin to fade. The brain still craves sugar, but the reward no longer seems as strong as it did at the beginning. And this creates an extremely negative cycle. You eat more Oreos trying to regain energy, but the more you eat, the worse you feel a few hours later. At this point, your energy would likely become completely unstable. You would have brief bursts of energy right after eating, followed by fatigue, drowsiness, and a constant feeling of sluggishness. The body would also begin to show more visible signs of inflammation. Your face might appear more swollen due to fluid retention and excess sugar circulating in your body. Some people might start to notice oilier skin, a feeling of warmth in their body, or even minor inflammatory reactions. But perhaps the most uncomfortable part was the digestive system. After 4 days of consuming virtually only refined sugar, ultra-processed flour, and industrial fat, the gut would likely be extremely irritated. Many people would experience constant abdominal discomfort, irregular digestion, and frequent episodes of diarrhea or nausea after eating. And mentally, the brain begins to slow down. A lack of essential proteins, vitamins, and minerals begins to directly affect mental clarity, mood, and energy levels. At this stage, many people would likely start to feel more easily irritated, less patient, and even have difficulty performing simple daily tasks. It's as if the entire body is functioning at its limit, trying to survive on a fuel that can't truly sustain the organism. And on the 5th day, the signs of wear and tear start to become really hard to ignore. Day 5. By the 5th day, most people would probably start to realize that their body is no longer just uncomfortable. It's trying to fight back. You might wake up feeling drained, even after sleeping. The sensation would be almost as if the body were functioning at half its normal energy level. And this happens because, at that point, the body is already extremely overloaded by constant fluctuations in blood sugar. The brain would also begin to feel this strongly. The rapid drops in glucose after each Oreo meal would likely cause irritability, difficulty concentrating, and even feelings of anxiety in some people. You eat seeking energy, but a few hours later the fatigue returns even stronger. And there's something even stranger going on. Even when consuming thousands of calories a day, your body starts to act as if it's malnourished. Because it continues desperately searching for proteins, fiber, vitamins, and minerals that simply aren't getting through. It's almost as if the entire organism is sending out emergency signals. At this point, many people would probably begin to feel constant hunger, mental fatigue, headaches, and difficulty even feeling satisfied after eating. But perhaps the worst part remains the intestines. After 5 days of living on practically refined sugar and ultra-processed flour, the digestive system would likely be completely irritated. Feelings of heaviness in the stomach, abdominal discomfort, gas, and episodes of diarrhea would become much more frequent. And while all this is happening, the inflammation inside the body continues to silently increase. Day 6. On the 6th day, your body would likely begin to enter a state of true nutritional exhaustion. At this point, many people would already find it difficult to even perform simple daily tasks. The body is still receiving calories all the time, but it starts to function as if it were empty. And there is a very clear reason for this. The human body can survive for a few days consuming only sugar and ultra-processed fat, but it cannot function well that way. The brain, muscles, intestines, and even the hormonal system slowly begin to feel the lack of essential nutrients. His energy would likely become completely unpredictable. You might feel small spikes right after eating Oreos, quickly followed by fatigue, body aches, and that feeling of brain fog, as if your brain were working slower. Many people would probably start to lose even the pleasure of eating Oreos at this stage. The brain remains trapped in the sugar cycle, but the body is already clearly showing that it's tired of that food. And physically, the signs become more evident. The swelling would likely increase. The face would look more tired. Bowel discomfort could become almost constant. And some people might even start to feel minor body aches or a general feeling of inflammation. It's as if the entire organism is trying to warn, "That's not enough fuel to keep me going." And on the 7th day, The effects would likely reach the most extreme point of the entire experiment. Day 7. By the 7th day, your body would probably already be completely saturated. At this point, many people would wake up feeling physically and mentally exhausted. It wouldn't just be ordinary tiredness. The sensation would likely be of an inflamed, heavy body functioning far below normal. And the scariest thing is that all of this happens even when consuming large amounts of calories every day. Because the problem was never just eating too much. The problem is that, for an entire week, your body received practically only refined sugar, ultra-processed flour, and industrial fat, while still lacking the nutrients it truly needs to function. The brain begins to sense this very strongly. At this stage, many people would likely experience difficulty concentrating, irritability, and a constant feeling of mental sluggishness. It's as if the brain is working while tired all the time. But perhaps the most uncomfortable part was the digestive system itself. After 7 days without real fiber, adequate protein, or fresh food, the gut would likely be completely out of whack. Many people would experience frequent abdominal discomfort, poor digestion, gas, and recurring episodes of diarrhea or malaise shortly after eating. And there's another important detail. Even after eating Oreos several times throughout the day, your body would likely still feel hungry. Not necessarily hungry for sugar, but hungry for real nutrition. At this point, the body begins to almost beg for real food. Water, fruits, proteins, vegetables. Anything that helps restore what was lacking during the week. And perhaps that's the scariest part of the whole experiment. Because the human body can survive for several days on a diet of only ultra-processed foods. But it slowly begins to functionally collapse while trying to do so. So, what would really happen if you ate only Oreos for 7 days? His body would probably survive. But it would slowly begin to function worse each day. And that's the scariest part. Because in the beginning, everything seems pleasurable. Sugar activates the brain, releases dopamine, and creates that quick feeling of reward that makes you want to keep eating. But while this is happening, the body silently begins to fall out of balance. Blood sugar fluctuates constantly. Energy levels are constantly rising and falling. The intestines begin to suffer, and the brain enters a constant cycle of hunger and fatigue. Even when consuming thousands of calories a day, the body continues to desperately search for real nutrients that simply aren't getting through. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of this entire experiment. Highly processed foods like Oreo can fool the brain for a few hours. But the body always notices the difference.